In this video, we will talk about the factor of safety. We will discuss what it is and how to look at it. The factor of safety is the ratio between the maximum load possible for a structure and the maximum intended load for that same structure. Let's take an example to clarify. Let's say I have a shelf that is supposed to carry some books. The shelf can only carry 100 kilograms worth of books. After that 100 kilograms, the shelf will simply break or collapse. So 100 kilogram worth of load is the maximum possible load. And this came about due to the material used and the overall design of the shelf. It has nothing to do with me as a user. Now, I want to have that shelf at home, and for my use, I expect the weight I will put on it to be 50 kilograms worth of books. This is the maximum intended load, and it came about as a result of my personal use of the shelf. It has nothing to do with the material or design. So in this case, my factor of safety equals to 100, the maximum possible load, divided by 50, my maximum intended load, which gives me a value of 2. Now, let's talk more closely about how this is calculated and why it's important. Nowadays, the factor of safety is mostly calculated using software like SolidWorks simulation. This is because in one way, it might not be very practical to measure that factor of safety in real life. For example, assuming we're building a bridge, then actually building and loading the bridge to destruction just to find the factor of safety might not be the best idea out there. For smaller products like consumer goods, real-life testing can be important, but using a software is much cheaper, faster, and can minimize the number of actual physical prototypes we do to find the factor of safety. In those cases, simulation softwares are coupled more closely with real-life testing. From the name, the main purpose of a factor of safety is to keep our products safe. This is to avoid them breaking very early in their use cycle in case of consumer products, or in some cases to avoid hurting people like in the case of infrastructure or industrial equipment. Another term that can relate to the factor of safety is the term reliability. A critical value for the factor of safety is 1. If our factor of safety is less than 1, then there is a good likelihood that our design will fail. If the factor of safety is exactly at 1, then we are more or less at the edge. This can also mean that the design will likely fail in a short time. If it is more than 1, then the design will likely not fail, at least when all the conditions are perfectly met. So we would want our designs to always have a factor of safety that is more than 1. The range you would want your factor of safety to be would vary a lot depending on the type of product you're working on and how critical it is. The higher the factor of safety, the higher its reliability. And very likely, a higher cost will be accompanied with that as well. Regardless of whatever factor of safety we are targeting, here are a few notes to keep in mind. 1. When a software package like SolidWorks Simulation solves for anything, we end up getting approximations, not exact real values. So you always want to leave yourself some space for margins of error. This could be by increasing your targeted ideal factor of safety by a little bit. 2. The factor of safety you will get off the software will not count for the age of the material used, which can naturally make the structures weaker over time. So that is something to consider when deciding on a factor of safety. In many cases, you might want to pump it up a bit to account for that. 3. Whenever we do something in the software, we often deal with perfectly controlled situations. However, that might not be the case in real life. Once a product goes out for human use, it gets exposed to unpredictable or unaccounted for conditions that we simply do not know or do not have control of. So you can also look at the factor of safety as a factor of ignorance, as it will account for those all unknown factors and conditions. With that in mind, you might want to increase your aimed factor of safety. This is also a reason of why you should always do real-life testing for your products when possible. In practice, you would decide on the factor of safety you want to aim for first. Then analyze the factor of safety of your design. From there, you might want to adjust your design to match the aimed for factor of safety. For example, let's go back to our shelf. Let's say that I want to keep a factor of safety of 2. For me, that's reliable enough to account for the expected and to account for the variations in the unexpected. Now, the question would be, how thick should the shelf be to have a minimum factor of safety of 2? With that, I have a solid metric that can dictate and drive elements of the design itself. Now I can easily make the design thick enough to hit that factor of safety and be able to call it a sound design, in that it will not break and that it will not be using too much materials for no reason. If you happen to be in charge of designing a product, one question you might think of is how can you determine the factor of safety that can work best for you? Unfortunately, there is no magical number that can work for everything. So you might have to give some thoughts considering the use scenarios of the product you are in charge of. Suppose you are working in an established company or working within a very established industry. In that case, you might be able to find some standard factor of safeties that you would have to adhere to. If not, then it would be an open-ended standard that you would have to establish.